why is the world accepting the killing of 10,000 Palestinian children? The kind of grievability of these kids is less because they're Arab or that they're Muslim or that they're brown or that they belong to the global south. But whatever it is, I don't think that we would have had the same reaction had there been 10,000 Ukrainian children killed in such a short period of time.
We carry on the conversation with Dr. Gassanon Abou Sitтой, the esteemed plastic and reconstructive surgeon who spent more than 40 days in Gaza operating on the wounded and injured under Israeli bombardment.
How do you provide personalized treatment to 2.5 million people who have been traumatized by being directly attacked, by watching loved ones die, loved ones being injured?
Since returning to the UK from Gaza, the British Palestinian doctor has repeatedly spoken out about what he witnessed on the ground. This has included giving testimony to London's Metropolitan Police, as well as to members of the UK Parliament.
It's almost like the voice of the British people is not being heard, and the voices of a lot of MPs is being intentionally censored by the leadership of the two main parties.
In part 2 of our interview, we delve into a range of topics. Dr. Abou Sitтой accuses Israel of using white phosphorus in Gaza. He also talks a bit about his upbringing and how his Palestinian identity drove him to study medicine. Dr. Ghassane, welcome to part 2 of our conversation. Again, thank you for taking the time. Following on from where we left off, I mean, has your outlook towards the international community changed in any way? Because I think you once said, you know, something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, that, you know, a world that accepts 7,000 children being killed and no one to be asked for it is a hard world to be a part of. I mean, is that signifying a change in your outlook towards the international community?
I mean, I think in addition to its kind of Arab-Israeli dimension, this war really puts the world at a junction where we have to ask, has the world turned its back on all international norms that were created after the Second World War to try to create some kind of rules that that manage the conduct of war? Because you have to ask yourself, there are only two answers to the question, why is the world accepting the killing of 10,000 Palestinian children? Either that we now accept that it's a free-for-all and everything is acceptable in war, including the murder of 10,000 children, or that these really children don't matter as much as children in London, or 10,000 children in Paris, or 10,000 children in Frankfurt.
Palestinian children.
Absolutely. And so, you know, the kind of grievability of these kids is less because they're, you know, either you want to say because they're Arab, or that they're Muslim, or that they're brown, or that they belong to the global south. But whatever it is, I don't think that we would have had the same reaction had there been 10,000 Ukrainian children killed in such a short period of time.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of interest, not only in your testimony, but also who you are as a person. If you allow me just to ask a few questions, I mean, I see there's a library of books in front of us here. You know, if we could just chat a bit about these books, what interests you, what you like to read about, and we can carry the conversation as well.
Sure.
Yeah, can we do that?
Yes.
Thank you, Doctor. All right, Doctor. Well, there's still a lot to speak on. I just wanted to take a moment to step away and kind of. I saw your books, your personal library here. I mean, what books do you like reading? What books interest you? What ones do you cherish that you can talk about a little bit?
For me, what medicine has always allowed me to do is to see up close the manifestations of political and economic and social currents in people's lives.
Yeah.
But the eye doesn't see what the mind doesn't know. And so unless you have with you the lenses, the analytical lenses to understand what you're seeing, you just don't register what you see in the clinic, what you see in the operating room, what you see in the wars, not just in Palestine, but in Yemen and Syria and Iraq. And so for me, trying to understand or trying to find these theoretical and analytical lenses has always been a kind of almost like a parallel pursuit to the pursuit of clinical understanding of war injuries.
Sure. And this is a book that you've written. You've written a book on war injuries as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I could see this summer the one of the medical textbooks on managing war injuries in children.
Yeah.
And there's another book that came out a few years before that on reconstructing war injured patients.
Right. Are there other books that you like to read, or are there other books that you like to spend your time on, kind of just going through the pages?
So there's a very rich history of, within the Palestinian story, of the role of health and the provision of health as part of the kind of Palestinian national liberation struggle. And so there are lots of doctors, both Palestinian and non-Palestinians who were an intrinsic part of different battles, who've written their stories. A very close friend and a mentor, Dr. Suyang, wrote her book From Beirut to Jerusalem about her experience in the 82 war, and then when she was as a witness in the Sabra and Shatila massacres, and then in the first Intifada.
Was there a driving factor that pushed you to get into medicine, doctor?
It was this need to try to be close to people, to be close to understanding what was happening to our people. Growing up as a Palestinian.
You were born in Kuwait?
I was born in Kuwait. Growing up as a child in the 70s, seeing the civil war in Lebanon unfold, and then in the summer of 82 as a 13-year-old watching the invasion of Lebanon, and then the siege of Beirut, and then the massacres. All of these
were
things,
your formative years, basically.
Absolutely, were formative in my ability to kind of understand the world around me and my place in this world.
Mm. And then that became some sort of purpose.
Absolutely, it drove my my decision to go into medicine, and then my decision as a medical student to go to Palestine during the first Intifada,
Right.
and to
And
Iraq.
is this why we see you volunteering for these missions throughout the years?
And then what happens is it becomes a self-fulfilling kind of drive, because the more experienced you become, the more useful you become, the more you feel that you have a duty to be there because you have added value. And so it's like a snowball. Every war you learn more about it, and then you become much more important for you to be there because you have more to offer.
Yeah. Well, this begets a question, actually, Doctor. I mean, we're in your house right now. You've been gracious enough to host us. But when you were in Gaza just recently, a few weeks ago, the Met Police here in London, they actually came here to your house, and they questioned, I believe, your wife.
Yeah.
And they said it was just because they received a report about a person being in a war zone. But you had a different view to that. You don't think that that's basically the main reason? I
mean, it's part of what's happening in Europe and North America, trying to silence Palestinian voices, trying to silence pro-Palestinian narrative. At the end of the day, the police could have easily found out. If you put my name in Amazon, the books that I've written come out. If you put my name in Google, newspaper articles about previous wars that I'd either written or had been written about me come out. And so it's not like I was someone who had shown up out of the blue to be involved in a war. It was all very, very open and very, very public.
And how did you feel when you heard that happened?
I was extremely distressed. I mean, I thought my wife had enough to worry about,
Sure.
and to worry about the police showing up. And that's why that night I was scheduled to be interviewed on BBC Newsnight, and I decided to come out and say, and that's why I got in touch with my lawyer immediately to kind of pursue this. I felt that it needed to be nipped in the bud very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I don't want to keep you standing. We're gonna take a seat now, Doctor. That's okay. Yeah, please have a seat. Doctor, we were speaking earlier about the wounds that you've seen, and you mentioned white phosphorus. Now, you know, Israel has been accused of using white phosphorus bombs in Gaza and southern Lebanon just the past few weeks. You know, rights groups say that this should be investigated as a war crime. The Israelis deny this, but you've said that you've seen wounds that are characteristic of white phosphorus bombs. And you were in Gaza in 2009, where you treated patients for white phosphorus bomb wounds. And in 2009, Human Rights Watch actually did document that Israel used those bombs, white phosphorus bombs. Now, what did you see this time around that made you believe that these are white phosphorus wounds?
The injuries from white phosphorus or the burns from white phosphorus are very characteristic. White phosphorus is a chemical, and so unlike thermal burns, i.e. heat burns, where the burn is on the outside and then moves in, these phosphorus burns really just drill their way through the body until they reach the very deep part of the body, because as a chemical it continues to burn until it's no longer exposed to oxygen. And so these burns are almost like a core that goes from the outside to the inner aspect of the patient. And you've seen it once, you've seen it again, because when you start cutting away at the burn tissues, really it's like a tube of burn tissue going all the way inside.
So basically, as soon as you see it, you're able to...
If you've seen it once, you see it, you know exactly what you're dealing with.
Right. And what kind of effect does it have on the injured?
So the depth of the burn means that the disability that they cause because of the amount of fibrosis and the limitation in movement is much, much worse.
Right. And I mean, when patients came in with these wounds, were they conscious? Were they unconscious? I mean...
So because they'd been used before, patients actually knew what they were.
And they were saying it.
Absolutely. And so what was happening is that these bombs would explode at high altitude, and then they would cover the whole area with a kind of canopy of these phosphorus pellets, which would rain down on patients. And if you'd see, you know, even the wounded, they'd seen them before in 2009, and they knew what they were. And then again, when they were used much more widely in Shati beach camp, people also knew what they were. They were just being used on people fleeing the refugee camp.
What were your discussions with Scotland Yard like? So you were invited to give testimony about what you have witnessed. What was that procedure like?
It was actually just like giving evidence in any crime. I went with my lawyer, and then over I think several hours, talked to them about all of what I had witnessed. There was a lot of concentration naturally on the Ahli attack, but there was really just giving evidence about a whole range of events that I had witnessed while in Gaza, and it was a formal taking of a witness statement.
What do you hope to achieve through it?
I think there are several avenues. There's the avenue of the British courts. As a British citizen and the victim of a war crime and a witness of multiple war crimes, we're hoping that through the British courts things would be taken forward against both individuals and Israeli institutions. And also that the war crimes unit would then hand over the dossier to the ICC, to the International Criminal Court, as part of a kind of war crimes international effort.
How have you been seeing the role of the ICC throughout all of this?
I mean, they have been extremely reluctant to come out but I think the overwhelming scale of the carnage means that even the ICC is no longer able to kind of hide what's happening. And the blatant Israeli statements by the Israeli politicians and security and army officials. You see, in genocide, intent is much stronger or of much greater importance than other crimes. And so when Netanyahu refers to the Palestinians as the Amalek, which is a kind of, old scripture description of people who you have the right to kill, and to kill their children and to kill their sheep, or that other Israeli politicians and army officials refer to the Palestinians as human animals, or they refer to Palestinians, to this war, as Dichter said, the ex-head of internal security, as the second Nakba. All of these blatant and open statements are indictments of themselves to genocidal intent.
And what about your testimony to, or maybe the discussions that you've been having with MPs in the UK, British MPs? How has that been like?
The dilemma, or not the dilemma, the strange thing in the United Kingdom is that, as we've seen from these demonstrations with 700 and 800,000 people coming out, as we've seen with open popular resentment to the British government's stance on Palestine, the British political elite, be it the government or the leadership of the Labour Party, continues in its position of supporting the Israeli attack on Palestinians. And so MPs are under a lot of pressure from their constituents, but at the same time feel that they're being blocked by the leadership of their parties from expressing the will of the people. And
that's actually what I want to ask you about. How have you been seeing this play out in British politics, Gaza specifically?
It's almost like the voice of the British people is not being heard, and the voices of a lot of MPs is being intentionally censored by the leadership of the two main parties. And this will have repercussions not just on British politics vis-a-vis the Middle East, but even internal British politics, where more and more people will feel alienated from the political process because they feel that regardless of how they pursue peacefully expressions of dissatisfaction with government policy, government remains deafened to these demands.
I mean, when it comes to, just back again to children, we spoke about the injuries, we spoke about the amputations. I think one thing that's not spoken about a lot is the mental impact on the children and the survivors. I don't know what your view of it is. What kind of mental impact does that have on the kids, and what kind of mental support do they need?
The problem with any mental health approach to what's happening in Gaza is that in the very definition of post-traumatic stress disorder, there's a post-trauma component. And so in Gaza there is no post-trauma. Plus, mental health relies on a kind of personalized treatment of one-to-one. How do you provide personalized treatment to 2.5 million people who have been traumatized by being directly attacked, by watching loved ones die, loved ones being injured, by a chronic sense of insecurity, by fear, and by repeated wars? I mean, that's the limitations of mental health treatment when faced with something of the magnitude of what's happening in Gaza. Needs a kind of reassessment of what constitutes mental health support in a place like Gaza.
And therefore, what needs to be done?
Well, I mean, the problem is what needs to be done first and foremost is the killing needs to stop. And then the physical wounds need to be treated. And then you can look at the mental health wounds.
Yeah. Now that you're back, do you feel like your sense of purpose changed? Do you feel like you have a different kind of mission now?
You owe it to your patients to fight for their right to receive the treatment that they need and the justice that they deserve.
Yeah.
And I think that's the driving purpose since I've left.
Yeah.
You feel that you owe them to see the treatment journey completed, and that was the catastrophe in Gaza. Is that it wasn't completed? That so many of them still need more surgical interventions, so many of them still need reconstructive surgery, and that one of the reasons why I left eventually is that I felt that the system had collapsed to the extent that I was no longer able to provide that basic treatment.
Would you return?
Absolutely, in a heartbeat. If there is,
despite everything that you've seen.
Despite everything, I just need to be able to function as a surgeon. I need the resources to work as a surgeon, to provide the kind of treatment that I need, the operating room space and the medication and the material to be able to provide to my patients the treatment that they're owed.
Why is it easy for you to say yes to such a decision?
It's always been easy for me to say yes because it's the right thing to do, and because it's a decision that I had made that put my life in a trajectory that led to this moment and will continue in the future to lead to similar wars, and it's what my life has been all about since I started this career.
I don't know how much you were following or you were able to follow social media when you were there, Doctor. But, you know, you've... the cat just came through. The cat just came through. This is nice. This is nice. Hi. Hi. You have one cat?
No.
Just the one cat?
No.
Basically what I was saying is on social media, there was an outpouring of support for you, even while you were there. And you've been called a hero several times. I don't know, how do you see yourself in all this? Do you see yourself as a hero?
No. I mean, I see myself as someone who comes from probably a different age where these things were the expected norm. I feel myself as part of a rich tradition within Palestinian life where health was an intrinsic part of the national liberation movement and the mobilization of Palestinians in their struggle for freedom. I believe that I belong to a time before the corporatization of medicine and before health became a commodity.
So where do you see yourself in all of this?
I just feel that I somehow belong in my values to a better time where these things were the norm rather than the exception.
You think this is the time that we're in now, that this is an exception? Absolutely.
Medicine is corporatized, health is just a commodity. Individualism means that there's no sense of the collective good. And those traditions within Palestinian society that sustained us all the way into and throughout the first Intifada were dismantled as a result of the Oslo Agreement and the culture of the Oslo Agreement.
What are your biggest fears about Gaza today, Doctor?
That the Israelis would achieve in the ceasefire through siege what they failed to achieve in the war. That the siege would ensure that Gaza remains destroyed, the wounded untreated, no schools, no universities, so that eventually those who were able and had managed to stay would eventually be driven out.
You've been doing this for 30 years now. As we said, you've been to several countries, several war zones to carry out these missions. But you still go back to Gaza again and again. And Palestinian identity is such a vital factor of who you are. What is Gaza to you, Doctor?
Gaza is home. Is home and in ways that is beyond home, even though I didn't grow up there. Gaza carries with it the essence of the Palestinian struggle. Gaza is the home of 85% refugees. But historically, even the kind of critical leaders of the Palestinian liberation movement came from Gaza, and those who didn't, like Ghassan Kanafani or Majd Abu Sharar, spent formative years in Gaza. You know, Gaza has a way of sustaining Palestine in the darkest moments.
It holds a special place for you. Absolutely.
And everything that I had believed about Gaza and the Palestinians in Gaza was vindicated in this war. They are a people of immense power, immense humanity, great dignity, and they carry within them hopes of salvation, not just for Palestinians, but for the whole region, and an example for people in the South struggling against Western imperialism and colonialism.
And on that note, I want to thank you for your time, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
We had a long conversation. Thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you, Dr. Ghassane. Thank you.